Soyuz MS-26 spacecraft that he rode to orbit in, along with Ovchinin and Wagner from the Baikonur Cosmodrome in Kazakhstan. The International Space Station is currently flying 260 miles above the Earth, currently crossing the southeastern coast of Africa, moving in a trajectory from northwest to southeast in an orbit inclined 51.6 degrees to either side of the equator. At the SpaceX Mission Control Room in Hawthorne, California, the SpaceX flight controllers are reporting that all of Freedom's systems are in excellent shape. Nick Hague there, as you see on your screen, stowing some last-minute items aboard the Dragon spacecraft that he is commanding from undocking through splashdown. The weather has been monitored for the splashdown sites in the Gulf of America throughout the day. The reports continue to be that the weather is forecast to be excellent for Dragon's homecoming on Tuesday afternoon. From the time of undocking through splashdown, it's a fairly short phasing, as they term the ballistics end of the operation, about 17 hours of transit between the time the Dragon will undock from the International Space Station and the time it will splash down. Again, splashdown off the coast of Florida in the Gulf is scheduled for 4:57 p.m. Central Time, 5:57 p.m. Eastern Time on Tuesday afternoon. We should be seeing Suni Williams and Butch Wilmore shortly. At the time of splashdown, predicted to be Tuesday afternoon, Williams, again, will have logged 286 days in space on this, her third flight, and a total of 608 days in space, the second most by any American astronaut, right behind Peggy Whitson, who has 675 days in space on her bio. Butch Wilmore, with his 286 days in space at the time of splashdown tomorrow, on this, his third flight, will have logged 464 days in space. Nick Hague, wrapping up his third mission with 171 days in space, will have a total of 374 days in space, to his credit. And again, Alexander Gorbanov of Roscosmos ending his first flight into space with a splashdown tomorrow and a total of 171 days on his biography. We are moving into a brief handover between satellites on the Tracking and Data Relay Satellite System. There you see a view of us here in Mission Control in Houston at the Johnson Space Center in the International Space Station Flight Control Room. Once again, the flight director in charge of tonight's operation is Marcos Flores, the lead flight director for Crew 9, joined on console by spacecraft communicator Tess Caswell, whose voice you will hear talking to the crew periodically during the time frame between now and hatch closure, and then between hatch closure and undocking through the time that the Freedom spacecraft leaves what is called the approach ellipsoid. Basically, I term it the neighborhood of the International Space Station. at which point integrated operations between the Johnson Space Center and Hawthorne will come to an end, and it will all be in Hawthorne's hands to bring the crew home.
SpaceX copies LIO unsealed at 0258 Zulu. Continue with IMV duct teardown and hatch closure.
And Freedom Houston on the big loop. Sounded like a good comm check with SpaceX. At your convenience, we'll take a comm check with us.
And Houston, Freedom's got you loud and clear.
Copy.
With those voice checks between Nick Hague and the SpaceX Mission Control Room in Hawthorne and the Flight Control Room here in Houston, you're seeing Don Pettit and Alexei Ovchinin taking photographs of Butch Wilmore in his entry suit. Suni Williams is in the foreground near the hatchway. Once again, there are two SpaceX Dragons at the International Space Station. The one that the Crew 9 crew will be departing in a couple of hours from now is on the zenith or space-facing port of the Harmony module. The newly arrived Crew 10 crew docked early Sunday morning to the forward port of Harmony in their Dragon Endurance. And you see at the hatchway the four departing Crew 9 crew members posing for some final photos. Final handshakes and hugs between the departing Crew 9 crew members and the crew members who will remain on board the International Space Station, maintaining a continuous human presence on the orbital laboratory that began on November 2nd, 2000. Once again, we're in a brief handover between satellites that provide the downlink TV capability from the station. We'll be regaining that downlink TV just a moment or two from now. You saw the Crew 9, two of the Crew 9 crew members, Suni Williams and Butch Wilmore, already in their entry suits. Nick Hague and Alexander Gorbanov will don their suits once inside Dragon. Haig and Gorbunoff flew up to the International Space Station back on September 28th. So they're wrapping up a mission almost 6 months in duration. Williams and Wilmore, of course, with their extended mission in the home stretch of a 9.5-month flight spanning 121.3 million statute miles. And now inside Dragon, you see Butch Wilmore on the far left. In the center of your screen, Alexander Gorbunoff. Nick Haig on the far right. They will settle into their respective seats aboard Freedom as countdown clocks here in Mission Control are ticking backward toward the time of the command to initiate the opening of hooks holding Freedom to its docking port on the space-facing side of the Harmony module. That command to be issued about an hour and 55 minutes from now. The actual physical separation, what we peg as undocking for the history books, is scheduled at 12:05 a.m. Central, 1:05 a.m. Eastern.
SpaceX copies on hatch closure. We'll send a command momentarily to transition the state machine to hatch closed. You can reference your hatch closed event details for a few actions and then complete suit donning per procedure 4.010.
Freedom copies all.
And Nick Haig aboard Freedom confirming that Dragon's hatch to the International Space Station is closed. That call coming at 10:05 p.m. Central Time, 11:05 p.m. Eastern Time. So the Crew 9 crew now safely aboard the Dragon Freedom will complete their suit-up procedures, do systems checks. There will be a series of leak checks between Freedom and the International Space Station at the docking interface. You see Suni Williams on the far right-hand side of your screen. She will be seated next to Nick Haig, the Freedom commander. To Haig's right will be Alexander Gorbunoff, and you see Butch Wilmore on the far left. The undocking between Freedom and the International Space Station will take Freedom above and behind the orbital laboratory through a series of what are known as departure burns. Freedom then will swing below the space station on a trajectory for the deorbit burn, a 7-minute, 29-second braking maneuver that is scheduled at 4:11 p.m. Central Time on Tuesday afternoon, 5:11 p.m. Eastern Time. That will slow Dragon down by more than 50 meters per second, allowing it to drop out of orbit for its high-speed entry back into the Earth's atmosphere and a parachute-assisted splashdown off the coast of Florida. Once again, the 4 Dragon Freedom crew members you see in this view. Butch Wilmore on the far left, Alexander Gorbunoff with his back to the camera, Nick Haig just out of the field of view, and Suni Williams on the far right of your screen. The hatch was closed at 10:05 p.m. Central Time, 11:05 p.m. Eastern Time. The station hatch will be closed just a short time from now, enabling a series of leak checks to occur to make sure we have an airtight seal before the pressurization of pressurized mating adapter number 2 can begin. The vestibule will be depressed to vacuum, setting the stage for the initiation of the commanding of the opening of the hooks holding Dragon in place and the physical separation of Dragon from Harmony, with undocking scheduled at 12:05 a.m. Central Time, 1:05 a.m. Eastern Time. If you're just joining us, you're looking live inside the SpaceX Dragon Freedom. The Crew 9 crew all on board. On the far left, Butch Wilmore. On the far right, Suni Williams, who launched back on June 5th aboard a Boeing Starliner spacecraft, returning on Tuesday aboard the Dragon Freedom to complete what will be 286 days in space, 285 of which will have been spent on the International Space Station. Just to put their long-duration mission into context, it is not the longest mission in the history of U.S. spaceflight, the longest single mission. That distinction belongs to NASA's Frank Rubio, who had his mission extended due to a coolant leak on the Soyuz spacecraft that he was launched on from the Baikonur Cosmodrome in Kazakhstan. A replacement Soyuz was launched by Roscosmos. Rubio came home subsequent to that with a total of 371 days in space. Behind him, Mark Vande Hei, NASA astronaut, logged 355 days in space. Scott Kelly, 340. Christina Cook, 328. And Peggy Whitson, 289. On the far left of your screen, a good view of Dragon with its open nose cap. That nose cone will be closed following Tuesday's deorbit burn as part of the pre-entry procedures. Once again, moving into a quick handover here between satellites on our tracking and data relay satellite system. The Dragon crew all on board. The hatch is closed between Dragon and the International Space Station. The station hatch will be closed a short time from now, and leak checks at the docking interface between the two spacecraft will begin to make sure we have an airtight seal before the small passageway or vestibule, known as pressurized mating adapter number 2, will be ready for depressurization down to vacuum and the subsequent undocking of Dragon from Harmony's space-facing port about an hour and 47 minutes from now. Looking once again inside Dragon, Butch Wilmore on the left. Settling into his seat is the commander of Dragon, veteran NASA astronaut Nick Hague. On the far right of your screen, Suni Williams. Roscosmos cosmonaut Alexander Gorbanov is completing a few adjustments to items with his seat. He will don his entry suit just a few moments from now, and all 4 crew members will be positioned, ready for undocking and the beginning of a 17-hour trip back to Earth and a conclusion to this mission. As mentioned earlier, this is not the first time that Wilmore and Williams have been aboard the Dragon Freedom.
SpaceX Freedom, com check from C2.
C2 SpaceX, we have you loud and clear. Helmy?
Get you the same. I'm suited and seated, working on Alex, and we'll be finishing up and ready for suit checks here shortly.
SpaceX copies all.
That communication between the spacecraft communicator at SpaceX Mission Control in Hawthorne, California, and Dragon's commander Nick Hague. The communications checks continuing. Alexander Gorbanov yet to suit up. He will momentarily. As mentioned earlier, Williams and Wilmore not strangers to the Dragon Freedom. They have practiced suit-up procedures over the course of the past few months and took a ride aboard Freedom for a few minutes back on November 3rd when the spacecraft undocked from the forward port of the Harmony module and relocated to the zenith or space-facing port of the Harmony module. Slightly longer trip for Williams and Wilmore today, a 17-hour journey that will take them to a splashdown off the coast of Florida on Tuesday afternoon at 4:57 p.m. Central Time, 5:57 p.m. Eastern Time. Just to recap, the 4 crew members who are coming home tomorrow aboard the SpaceX Dragon Freedom are all inside Freedom. 3 of the crew members suited up and strapped into their seats. Alexander Gorbanov is completing some preparations before he dons his entry suit. The hatch between Freedom and the International Space Station was closed at 10:05 p.m. Central Time, 11:05 p.m. Eastern Time. We are awaiting the closing of the hatch between the International Space Station on that side of the docking interface to permit leak checks to begin and ensure that we have an airtight seal before the vestibule or passageway is depressurized prior to undocking. The Dragon crew members will also undergo leak checks to their suits and further communications checks prior to the undocking itself, which is scheduled about an hour and 41 minutes from now at 12:05 a.m. Central Time, 1:05 a.m. Eastern. So as we stand by for confirmation that the station hatch is closed on that side of the docking interface, that activity to be supervised by Ann McClain, the NASA astronaut and commander of the Dragon Endurance that just arrived at the International Space Station, kicking off a handover period of just over a day between the 2 crews, an abbreviated handover compared to others that have preceded it, that designed to provide this opportunity for undocking, thus maximizing the best weather conditions that were forecast for this coming week, over the next few days. This is our best shot with pristine weather off the coast of Florida to bring the Crew 9 crew home.
On station on 2 for IDE egress.
Go ahead on 2.
We are in step 5.2 and we found some pieces of dust around the hatch seal area, so we are going to clean them with cotton tape.
Copy and concur with the plan.
Japan Aerospace Exploration. Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency astronaut Takuya Onishi newly arrived on the station as part of Crew 10, noticing a few flecks of dust along the hatch seals, so he will clean those off. We want to make sure that there's no foreign object debris at that hatch seal that could compromise the integrity of an airtight seal between pressurized mating adapter number 2 and the interface with the Dragon Freedom. You're looking right across Nick Hague the commander of the Dragon Freedom, the mission director at SpaceX's Mission Control Room in Hawthorne, reporting back to NASA Flight Director Marcos Flores here in Mission Control in Houston that we're just about ready for suit leak checks.
Waiting for call for 5.3.
TAC, you are go for step 5.3.
Okay, copy. We are go for closing Apex hatch, and I have one question for you.
Go ahead.
Another view of the crew aboard Dragon Freedom looking...
There is one SpaceX bag. It's labeled as unarmed PFD. The bag number is 153, and its carabiner is attached to one of the bungees in PMS3. Can we just leave it as it is?
Checking.
Once again, you're looking at a view across the four crew members, Butch Wilmore in the foreground, Alexander Gorbanov to his left, then Nick Hague, and just obscured on the far right-hand side of this configuration is Suni Williams.
SpaceX Freedom on the big loop, section 5 complete. We've got everybody suited with successful intercom checks.
SpaceX copies on successful intercom checks. Continue to section 6.
Freedom, welcome.
And in preparation of the leak checks of the 4 suits by the Crew 9 crew members, Butch Wilmore and the others putting their hands in their gloves. Those will be securely zipped in place before the leak checks will begin.
Station Houston on the big loop for the bag.
Go ahead on 2.
We would like you to remove that bag from PMA3 temp stow in node 2, and we will find a permanent home for it after the undock.
Okay, we'll temp stow it in node 2.
SpaceX Freedom on the big loop, section 6 is complete.
SpaceX copies completion of 4.010.
The hatch between the International Space Station and pressurized mating adapter number 2 is now closed. The Dragon hatch was closed at 10:05 p.m. Central Time, 11:05 p.m. Eastern Time. Just about 2 minutes ago at 10:26 Central, 11:26 p.m. Eastern, the station hatch also closed, and that sets the stage for the vestibule depressurization and final leak checks at the docking interface. Another perspective of Nick Hague and Alexander Gorbanov. Butch Wilmore is to Gorbanov's right. Essentially, you're looking over the shoulder of Suni Williams, who's in the far left seat, if you will, in the seating configuration on the Dragon Freedom.
Freedom SpaceX on the big loop. You have a go for procedure 4.011. We'll meet you in section 2 when ready.
Freedom copies, go for 4.011, sealing check, and press through section 1. Check it with you in section 2.
The crew closing their visors in advance of the individual leak checks on their suits.
Station Houston on the big loop for Ann prior to hatch close.
Right, Tess?
And taking a look at stowage and PMA 3 currently, we are seeing the APAS hatch cover, and we need that to go into the 0.5 CTB for DMAC.
Okay, we will put the hatch cover into the half CTB.
Thank you.
That conversation between Capcom Tess Caswell here in Mission Control and Ann McLean in your field of view, the Dragon Endurance Commander.
We are ready to pressurize.
As she checks the integrity of the hatch interface on the station side, the station hatch is closed. That's the androgynous docking adapter hatch. One more hatch has to be closed. That's the one between Harmony and the vestibule to International Docking Adapter 2. Meanwhile, leak checks now are beginning on the 4 suits of the Dragon Crew 9 passengers aboard the Dragon Freedom. The suit leak checks are underway. This should only take a minute or two.
And the Houston station on 2, checking for step 7.4.
TOC, you are go to deploy desiccant in 7.4.
Copy, go for 7.4.
SpaceX Freedom. We've got 4 good suits.
Freedom, we see the same, 4 healthy suits.
And that call by Dragon Commander Nick Hague, confirming that all 4 suits of the departing Freedom crew members have checked out, good leak checks on the suits, good integrity on those suits. So we now have set the stage for the undocking of the Dragon Freedom and the Crew 9 crew members just about 1 hour and 24 minutes from now. Just to recap, Suni Williams and Butch Wilmore accompanying Commander Nick Hague and Roscosmos cosmonaut Alexander Gorbanov for the ride downhill and a splashdown off the coast of Florida on Tuesday afternoon. We will be resuming our coverage, joined not just here at the Johnson Space Center, but by our colleagues in Hawthorne, California at the SpaceX Control Center. We will be back on the air just over an hour from now at 11:45 p.m. Central Time, 12:45 a.m. Eastern Time, for the undocking of the Dragon Freedom and the Crew 9 crew from the International Space Station. The weather conditions off the coast of Florida and the splashdown sites continues to be good, with splashdown of Williams, Wilmore, Gorbanov, and Hague scheduled for Tuesday afternoon at 4:57 p.m. Central Time, 5:57 p.m. Eastern Time. So with the Crew 9 crew strapped into their seats and good leak checks for their suits on the Dragon Freedom, we'll sign off for now, and we'll be back with you just over an hour from now for our undocking coverage. For now, we'll sign off. This is Mission Control Houston.